Well, Christmas 2020 is over, so what do you want to talk about next? New Year's plans or lack thereof? COVID? No one's tired of talking about that. Politics? All right, let's go with politics. I guess I'm the one recording, so I can pick. I want to tell you a story about a few months before the 2016 American election, and it's just a simple little story, but it illustrates a point. I was entering a meeting with a few other Christian leaders in our area, and the subject of the election back then in 2016 in the States came up. And I wasn't the one to bring it up. I'm smarter than that in that setting. I mean, I make a lot of dumb decisions and dumb mistakes, but bringing up politics in a group like that is not one of them. Someone else had, and I guess I naively or stupidly made some comments that were a little bit critical of Donald Trump's moral character, and I just kind of expressed my dissatisfaction that the Republican Party couldn't pick a better candidate than that in this day and age. And I'm not kidding you. Every eye in the room turned to me. Everyone was quiet until one person finally spoke and said to me, "I'll not forget it." Said, "Well, what? You gonna support Hillary then?" And the whole thing was kind of comical to me. I mean, we're a bunch of Canadians that can't even vote, talking about politics in a neighboring country, and the passion, I guess, that some of the people had there talking about these matters in an election that's not ours was puzzling to me, but interesting because I think it hinted at something. It hinted at this increasingly prevalent us versus them mentality that we see in society. And a couple of years after that episode, I came across this quote, and I'll read it for you now, and I'll see if this relates to you guys and what you experience in the world around you. Tribalism. More and more, this description characterizes the trajectory of our society, as we are descending into an increasingly savage pack mentality. Forget about civility. It's the law of the jungle out there, and if you're not with me, you're against me. How ironic that in a society that has worked so hard to resist drawing any absolute line between right and wrong, we are now so eager to label a right and a wrong side of history, and a right and a wrong kind of people. When our news feeds are drowning in a warfare rhetoric, how is God calling his people to engage? Will we batten down the hatches and shore up our defenses? Will we charge full tilt into battle under the war cry, "Take no prisoners"? What does it look like for the church to be reconciled to God, to forgive one another as the Lord forgave, and to live out our message of reconciliation in a deeply divided culture? It really is a great question. How will our church live out a message of reconciliation in a culture that is so deeply divided, so fragmented? How will we engage in a culture that's increasingly us versus them? I don't think it's a question of do we engage. Clearly, the church does. Clearly, as individual Christians, we do engage. And maybe there's some issues the church should engage in, and there's some that are better left for individuals to engage in. But it's not a question of do we. We certainly do, but how do we do it in a way that's effective, and perhaps even what issues or items do we even choose to engage in? Unfortunately, I'd suggest to you that we choose some of the wrong issues to engage in, and when we do engage, sometimes we go about it the wrong way. I want to show you a few news headlines. These come from a satirical Christian website called the Babylon Bee. But the fact that these are headlines on this site that so many people can resonate with, that they actually get an audience for this stuff, tells me that these are problems or debates or issues that are kind of rampant in church culture around us. And some of this is more inwardly focused, Christians debate Christians. Some of this is more focused toward looking externally to the world around us. But just for fun, indulge me and take a look at some of these headlines and again, see if you can relate to any of this. Apostle Paul's King James Bible up for auction. Thank the Lord. After all these centuries, we can finally prove which translation is the right one. Church replaces boring old hymns with same four songs every Sunday. I could die a happy man if I never heard one more argument about church music style. Church elders demand a recount after congregation votes to replace 30-year-old carpet. I've got a terrible feeling this one's based on a true story. Grizzly Bear shatters all pro wrestling records after identifying as human. I believe gender identity issues will become more complicated rather than clearer. Baptists introduce more modest floor-length tree skirts. I married a Baptist. I threw this one in just in case her family's watching. New study suggests arguing about politics is most effective method of evangelism. Well, the way some people talk or post online, you might think they believe that's true. Christians thank God they can still argue with each other online during quarantine. A nice generic headline to capture a sad reality. We love to fight with our words. The Babylon Bee. That's good stuff, I'm telling you. Check it out. I have literally sweat myself silly, laughing some evenings, going through article after article on that site. And it's just kind of like idea or topic, one after the other, that just point out the ridiculousness of some of the things that we fight about and argue about, or even if they're legitimate things to be dialoguing about, the ways in which we go about it, or the level of effort or energy that goes into it is kind of wild in some cases, both inside and out of the church. And I get it that most people that engage in these kinds of arguments, debates, discussions, they care passionately about the issues. And I think in most cases it's true that people are trying to uncover what is the truth or what is right about a certain topic. And if we're honest, sometimes caring about what is right might turn into more caring about being right. But in any event, people do care about truth. They care about what's right, at least in their own minds, even if it's not more of a universal truth. If you hop on Google right now or later today and just search for the terms truth conference, you're probably going to find a couple of dozen different conferences or events or seminars, workshops that have some title that somehow combine those words or words similar to that. Some of them are going to be Christian, some of them are going to be non-Christian. There's ideas out there about finding God's truth or finding your own truth, what works for you. People care about these things for one reason or another. And you're going to have to engage in life in some of these discussions. Could be on a small matter, could be on a large one, but it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, you're going to enter some kind of dialogue with someone about what is true and what is right. And as you do that, whether it's with people in your own church, maybe it's someone from a different church with a little bit different view, maybe it's a coworker or a neighbor or a family member, I'd invite you that when you're doing that, you choose your words carefully and you do it with a demeanor that is Christ-like. And to help you think through that a little bit in a real simple way, I'm going to give you a quote. I forget who I heard this from. If I remember the name, I would give it to you. But this individual said, truth is not a fruit of the Spirit. Okay, let me say it again. Truth is not a fruit of the Spirit. And when I first heard that, I wasn't completely sure that I agreed, but as the individual that said it kind of elaborated more, said, obviously the Apostle Paul, who gave us the list of the fruit of the Spirit, cared deeply about truth, spent his life looking for it, in his earlier years trying to enforce what is true, even using physical force to do that, and then spent the last years, decades of his life writing to churches about what is truth. So clearly he cared about what is true, as you and I should as well. But the point being that when it comes to interpersonal relationships and dialogue and how you get your point across, the very nature that you embody as a Christian, there are some other characteristics, we call them the fruit of the Spirit, that are really important when you conduct yourself in a private or a public setting. I'm going to get some help from some little elves in my house to remind you right now, what are the fruit of the Spirit?
Hey Gideon, you know that the fruit of the Spirit is not a coconut? I know. It's an apple, right? Well, if you want to be an apple, you might as well hear it. You can't be the fruit of the Spirit, because the fruit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Darn, I thought it was a pineapple. You thought it was an apple. Oh.
There you have it. The fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. If you're offering somebody today a glass of truth, but the cup you're using doesn't hold any juice from those fruit, I don't think that you actually poured from the truth bottle at all. And that's something to think about. Maybe you disagree, but I invite you to think about it. Another way to look at it is, even if you're saying a bunch of things that sound right, it's very possible to do it in the wrong way. You might be making accurate statements, factual statements, but if you don't do it embodying the fruit of the Spirit, doing it in a way that's loving above all else, you're not doing it in the way that God wants you to, in my opinion. When Jesus walked the earth, he did some preaching. Some might consider him the best preacher of all times. And really, what was his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, he taught that as believers, we ought to be salt and light in the earth. Salt, at the day, is meant to preserve, meant to decay. It wasn't really about flavoring or melting ice this time of year. It's a preservative, prevent decay in society, moral decay, trying to protect against that kind of thing as believers. You can't lose your saltiness, though, if you're going to do that. Salt and light. Light, it illuminates. It shows what's actually there and what's real. You're not stumbling around in the darkness trying to guess what might be in front of you. You see a light that provides guidance, shows a clear path. I firmly believe that when followers of Jesus do these things jointly, when we represent salt and light, people will be drawn to the gospel message. But if you're just going to be salt without light, you're going to end up fighting battles in this world, trying to preserve a bunch of things, trying to preserve a way of life, trying to preserve a way of doing church, trying to preserve morality or tradition, any number of things. Some of them might be good in and of themselves. But if you do that just as salt without light, I don't think you end up displaying the likeness of Jesus. Likewise, if you're just going to be light without salt, I think you end up maybe talking a lot about spiritual stuff. Again, maybe saying some things that might be accurate, some things that might be spiritually true. But if you do it without the saltiness that actually demonstrates a care for the culture around you, it might be a bunch of meaningless words that doesn't amount to much after all. I guess one other way I'd try to describe it to you today is that when it comes to any particular issue, a lifestyle, a choice, a political view or belief system, it's going to be easiest to absolutely oppose or absolutely go with the flow. But managing the tension in between is tough. Let me give you an example. We hear a lot, we have for years, we're going to continue to hear for years about sexual ethics, that kind of thing. What makes a marriage, what's allowed and what's not. The law over time will agree less and less with the church and vice versa. It's easy, I think, in today's world to completely go with the flow of where culture and government is headed. And you could do that without taking a lot of flack from any particular group. Likewise, in some churches, it'd be very easy to just declare absolutes about what you believe to be right and completely ignore, perhaps even disgrace or embarrass those that you disagree with. And so I think you go to either extreme. That's probably the easiest thing to do, to manage a tension in between, where you might have a particular viewpoint, just like I have a particular viewpoint, and you notice I haven't disclosed it. I don't need to tell you that to manage a tension in which you might be loving and respected by those around you, I think is a really difficult thing to do. I'll give you one more quote that, again, you might not agree with. I wasn't sure that I did it first either, just like the previous one I gave, but I'll give it to you for what it's worth, and you can think about it. If you're living too pagan for your Christian friends, and if you're living too Christian for your pagan friends, you might be in the sweet spot. If you're living a little too pagan for your Christian friends, and you're living a little too Christian for your pagan friends, you might be in the sweet spot. Take that and think about it. At some point in life, you're going to be forced to engage with someone on a point of contention, or you're going to be the one to bring up a point of contention because you see some issue that needs to be addressed. When you do it with love. Do it with peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and self-control in your heart. And when you fail to do it that way, admit it, confess it, apologize. Don't settle for lines like, that's just who I am, or that's just how I talk, or truth is truth no matter how it's said. Don't settle for that kind of approach. I know you're human. I'm human too. God knows that we're all human. There's grace. Like I said, ask for forgiveness when you fail. Pick up and move on again. Couple more quotes. I don't know who said these things first, but I think in our society, it's increasingly true that you may have once had a time in the past, maybe some decades ago, where perhaps the majority of people would have a somewhat decent understanding of what Christ stood for, what the Bible has to say. I think in this day and age, you could walk down a street, you could be in a neighborhood or a school or a workplace, and you might be the only Bible someone reads. You might be the only Jesus someone sees. Are you going to argue someone into following your version of Jesus because of how great you are or how greatly you can explain the truth or rationalize your opinion? Probably not. Will you instead pursue the love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control that Christ himself demonstrated as a human on earth, with the prayer that by God's grace, someone around you might see how great he is through all that? That's my prayer for you guys and girls. That's my prayer for me, that we would show the fruit of the Spirit, that we would show others the greatness of Christ, and by doing so, we'd make his name known in the world around us. I love you guys. I miss you guys. I look forward to seeing you all again at some point in person in 2021. God bless you all.